So today we have Patrick McGrath, Chief Information Officer and Head of Client Technologies at Savills. Don't let his baby face fool you. Pat is a commercial real estate veteran with nearly 2 decades of experience on the tenant side of corporate transactions. Throughout his career, Pat has worked on some of the most notable national deals and won several high-profile awards for his ingenuity. As a Wharton MBA, Pat has a unique and multidisciplined skill set for anticipating clients' problems and engineering solutions. Pat, thanks for joining What's Really Going On.
Thanks for having me, Lance. It's awesome to be here. I feel like what a great way to start the week. I got that shout out from you. I sound so much more important than I am.
You're pretty important in my world. So
you're pretty important. So Pat, you've been in the real estate business for quite some time. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. So I would describe myself as a curious real estate professional. I started my career as a broker and had an amazing experience doing the bootstrap brokerage bit.
In Philly?
Actually started as a market research and financial analyst and moved to brokerage. That was a step up back in the day. So I did my brokerage career in Philadelphia, but I started way back when as a market researcher with a gentleman, Jack Descharme, in San Francisco.
Wow.
Little known fact.
There you go.
There you go.
Snapple fact of the day.
There you go. Put it on the back of the lid. So I had an amazing, wonderful career in brokerage. I did that for about 9 years, built up a book of business, worked with some of our top clients on portfolios across the U.S., had the opportunity to transact with most of the professionals across our business. And then I decided to go back and, like you said, get an MBA in real estate and finance. So I did that for 2 years and then evolved into running our post-merger integration when we sold the business to Savills, which was a 3-year stint, built up our cross-border business, and then moved into the role that I'm in right now, which is overseeing client technology and what I call the digital revolution happening at Savills.
So that's actually really interesting, and this takes us to our next question. So you said you started your career as a broker representing tenants. Can you tell us a bit about that journey, what that day-to-day was like? And then also there was an inflection point in your career that you realized you were more interested in leadership and management rather than being a traditional broker. So can you tell us about how that evolved and at what point in your career you realized that you wanted to get more into the management side of the business rather than the brokerage side?
Sure. So let's start with brokerage. I think brokerage is just an amazing business, right? So it's not for everybody.
Yep.
But it was a great experience for me. I learned some skills that I think are valuable across any industry. It takes perseverance, it takes commitment, it takes organizational skills, and ultimately you got to be able to sell yourself and you got to be able to communicate. So I think that was not natural for me. Like I wasn't sort of a extroverted sales type person, and when I moved into that part of the business, I thought, what a great opportunity for me to really learn that skill set. And I can tell you, it's so critically important to what I do today, right? Like I have to sell a vision. I have to sell our company on why they should invest resources in certain areas. And I have to sell everybody across the business on why they should use those, tools and new ways of working with their clients.
So let's talk about those for a second. So what are you advocating for right now? Like what is high on the priority list in terms of technologies that the organization should be investing in?
Good question. So what I advocate for every day is us, competing and winning in a really competitive marketplace. Sure. And in order to do that, from my perspective, we have to respond to what our clients are expecting in terms of the way that they want to consume information, the way in which they want to interact with their advisors.
And anticipating what that will be going forward.
Or just acknowledging the shift that happened in the last 10 years, sure. Right? I mean,
because it's such an archaic industry.
Yeah. So one of the things, I think one of the unique things that I bring to the role is the fact that I grew up as a broker, right? So I kind of understand the business a little bit differently than maybe a traditional coder, like tech background, CIO type. And I think that's incredibly valuable for me because I can kind of like cut through sort of layers and say, you know what, this is something that I would really want to use to run my business. So that's great.
And we see that on the brokerage side. I mean, all the initiatives that you've already put into place. have been leaps and bounds further ahead than anything we've seen in the past. And I think probably better than what most of our competitors, if not all of them, are doing and implementing.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. I certainly hope that that's the case. I mean, ultimately, if you all don't adopt it, it's not really a great endeavor, right? So, so again, I think designing with the end user in mind and like being an end user is a very helpful like attribute that I bring to the job function. But sort of zooming out for a second, right? Going back to like, what are the areas that I think are really important? I mean, it goes back to winning, right? And we have to acknowledge where the client's moving and kind of what the expectations are. And to me, that has shifted dramatically in the last 10 years. You're seeing a big demographic shift in terms of who our end user is on outside the company.
Yep.
And you're seeing
from both the management and labor force perspective.
Yeah, from a management and from the person that's sitting on the other side of the table is looks and feels a little bit different than they did 10 years ago.
Absolutely.
And their expectation about the way that they're going to interact with us during the course of a project or to develop strategy with regards to their people and property portfolio, I mean, that's dramatically changed, right? I mean, it changed for me personally in this business back in like 08, 09 when the iPhone dropped. I started using cloud-based apps immediately. Like I was using Dropbox to communicate with other constituents across our business and not going through our traditional, file configuration.
Sure.
So I sort of did a complete end around the legacy technology, and it was so much easier. It was so much better to be able to share those files, and dynamically send somebody a link. The use case was just compelling, and I wanted to work that way. And I think more and more you're seeing those tools just becoming like the standard way of operating. So that's been a shift that I think we have to acknowledge and we have to deliver in the way that our clients want us to deliver. The other big trend has been the onset of like data. I mean, there's just an exploding amount of data. And our clients expect us to incorporate that and make it useful for them to help them, communicate across their business where the priorities are and why they should be doing what they're doing.
So let's talk about the data for a second, because you actually pioneered a few really, really interesting platforms and concepts. So talk about how we're using data to really extrapolate all of this information and add value to the processes for our clients and these end users.
Okay, so I'll give you one really interesting example.
Perfect.
Our clients frequently are looking to understand their footprint and who's using what across their leased or owned portfolio of real estate. It's a big capital commitment they've made, and they want to show that it's actually driving productivity across their people, right? Ultimately, the most valuable asset that they have is the people that are generating new ideas, generating innovation, generating new products, and bringing those products to market. So one interesting thing is it's hard for our clients to really understand what the footprint of people looks like. Sure. But you've seen with social media that the people have self-reported their job functions, right? So they've gone out there in different mediums and they've said, here's who I am as a professional. Here are the things that I bring to the table because it's in their best interest to market themselves. So we can now tap into that data set and show a client in a second kind of how their people self-report their job functions across every market they work in. I mean, that's something that just didn't exist 15 years ago.
Right.
That's amazing.
So then it's like, what do you do with it? Are those the job functions that you really need to align with the vision of your company? I mean, that's a different way of looking at a problem that's existed for a long time with a new data set that can be really interesting when you unpack it and look at what it tells you about your people.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because you're focusing on people. I think, historically our business has been so focused and so myopic on office space.
Yep.
But it's really people space, right? And you want to make sure that you engage these people properly, and what you're doing, I think, is just a testament to that. And that takes us to our next question. So you've been on the brokerage side, as we discussed, management team and C-level of this organization. How's your career progressed and changed since you entered the business nearly 20 years ago? And how do you see it changing on the horizon in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So I think one of the amazing things about Savills as an organization is that my career has progressed the way that it has progressed. You don't see a lot of my peers, in terms of my age bracket, spending as long a tenure as I've spent at one company.
You're also a rock star.
Well, thank you, Lance. So are you. But seriously, I mean, that's a pretty unique attribute to our company. So you got to give you got to give a lot of people a lot of credit for having the ability to let me make and take risks through my career and learn and grow as
and give
a
you
professional.
autonomy to do so.
And give me the autonomy and give me the resources to be able to do that.
That's a humble perspective.
Well, it's true. I mean, it's totally
that's why we're all
true.
here today.
It's totally true. And I have a lot of people to thank for that. That's not the case at every company.
Sure.
And I think that's a really powerful attribute of our culture that I hope we keep intact as we get bigger and we grow.
How old are you?
I'm 40. I just turned 40 in April.
So you just turned 40 in April. And the fact that you are sitting on the senior management team of this organization in the C-suite just goes to show how far ahead we're thinking, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think I give a lot of credit there. I mean, I think you're seeing a massive shift across every industry.
Absolutely.
So I'm not totally surprised that somebody in my age is working with the senior leadership to try to help us make that transition.
And you have the
company.
experience to back it up.
And I think that's I think increasingly you're seeing the companies that are able to make this pivot that we all need to make into the digital environment for our clients. They are looking to a demographic that understands the tools, and sort of naturally self-adopts and wants to work that way. So I think increasingly that's going to be more and more the case.
Yeah.
But
in our business,
I
it was
don't
definitely surprising.
Yeah. And well, we get labeled as kind of the dinosaurs, right?
That's right.
A little bit.
That's why it was a breath of fresh air when you came in and took over the helm for this role.
Yep. And
for somebody like myself, who's on the younger end of the senior broker spectrum, having somebody like you in my corner is so important. And that's candidly part of the reason why I think this company is so amazing.
I totally agree. I think it's really, it's awesome that we recognize that and that we are taking that very seriously. I think we absolutely have to take it seriously, because if you look at the last 10 years, it's not only been the onset of these new tools, these new ways of working, the new expectations that our clients have. You're also looking at like one of the lowest cost of equity environments that's ever existed, over the course of like modern history.
Sure. And
when you put cheap capital to work, looking across different industry verticals,
you get a multiplier.
You get some really talented people that are willing to rethink the way those businesses and industries work.
Yeah.
And we're in that environment. So if we don't take it seriously, if we don't really use the advantages that we have and put that together with new ways of working as a business, we're putting our business at risk. So I think we absolutely have to take it seriously, and I'm glad that we have, and I'm excited to be a part of that journey.
That's a really interesting perspective, because I'm not on the management side, right? Yeah. Understanding the cost of capital and how to invest in your company while capital's so cheap. I feel like if companies aren't investing in their businesses right now, they're going to be light years behind because of the multiplier effect on that.
And there's a lot of incentives to rethink the real estate asset class. I mean, it's the largest asset class by dollar value, and it kind of trades like the bond markets traded in the early 80s, right?
Sure.
I mean, it's largely paper-based. It's not digital exchange. And we have advisors that add a lot of value to their client base. But again, like, think about the world that we work in, where we're all on mobile phones and looking at where everything's trading every day. And why wouldn't it be that way for commercial real estate?
And there's limited transparency. Like, if you think about what we are doing, right, when you're looking at financial markets, you have full transparency in the financial markets, and you have people overseeing that.
Yeah, that went through the revolution of the 80s, and a lot of those exchanges were put in place at that time. So I'm not saying we're going to get there overnight, but I mean, if you think about it, low cost of equity, a lot of talented minds looking at industry vertical, those VCs, which one do we go after next? And here we are with commercial real estate. I mean, it's happening, and there's a lot of money being put to work rethinking the way that we operate and the way that these markets are consolidated and brought to bear for clients. And so we need to take that very seriously as a company. And we do, which is great.
That's
really excited about
that's actually a really good segue into our next question. So we've talked about the evolution into the digital world, right? The problems we face there. We touched on kind of the status quo of senior level executives in their 50s and how that's kind of adapted into the modern environment. What other problems did you see facing our industry, and what technologies and what initiatives are we implementing to break that status quo?
Yeah, so I think problem is an interesting word, right? Every problem is an opportunity on some level. So where you see problems, if you can come up with solutions and ways to tackle those problems, it just becomes a great opportunity for a new business. I think again, like macro theme, the expectations that clients and customers have about, the way that they're going to interact with different platforms, and the reality that technology is bringing to the table is sort of collapsing the expectation gap. Like, it's vanishing very quickly, the gap between expectations and reality because of technology. So
I think the expectations are just always there now.
Always there on some level, but again, like, just think about what's happening with the streaming wars. Like, everything's on demand, when you want it,
information
where you want
at your
it,
fingertips,
how you want it.
And our business
like,
is 10 years behind.
And so that's happening. Those expectations are being set out there in the marketplace. And the challenges are, how do we sort of transition the business so it can deliver that way?
Right.
And I think ideally, Savills is faster, willing to take a little more risk. Like I always say, the world doesn't need another commercial real estate brokerage firm. Right. It doesn't need another commercial real estate brokerage firm that's pretending to be a technology company. It needs something better. Right.
Yeah.
And the question is, how are we better? So I think we can be better by being more collaborative as a company. Right. You all, when you work across the brokerage platform, have an incredible wealth of information and history and experience that you can bring into now these new technology tools that can be literally like delivered on demand anywhere across mobile devices. So
let's
to
talk.
Me, that's a really powerful value proposition. So if we could be faster, like the right size organization, more collaborative, bring digital services and products to more global clients across, the tools that they expect to interact with, I think that's where we can excel.
Yeah, and I think part of the reason that we can be faster, even though Savills is a massive organization in the States, we're still nimble.
We have that entrepreneurial culture.
Yep.
Right. I don't have the most resources, but again, look at what we're doing right here. Like,
it's intellectual capital.
It's amazing to see the innovation that can happen when you get the right people together and like get them moving in that direction.
I'd agree. And I'd say, the unique thing about what we do as tenant rep brokers is no one's paying our bills unless we're killers.
Well, and I love the tenant rep broker piece too, right? Like, I grew up with one purpose, which was to design for the end user, like the client, the ultimate, like all the value in the commercial real estate asset class is generally derived from the corporate occupier. So the fact that like we're the ones that are hyper focused on the customer, right? Which is kind of like Amazon, right? It's like all about the customer. Like, we're zealous advocates of our constituency. I think that's a really unique perspective to bring to the world too.
I absolutely agree with you. So speaking of all this technology, you're the founder of a unique proprietary platform that won a whole bunch of awards, Knowledge Cubed, and you recently pioneered Market Alpha. Can you tell us a little bit about these technologies? Also, how do you see these technologies simplifying the processes for occupiers and for brokers?
Yeah, so Knowledge Cube, I love Knowledge Cube. It's like, again, grew out of a problem/opportunity. We were pitching a very big client of ours that was looking for us to manage their people and property information in a digital form versus like the traditional paper medium, like literally like 3-ring binders and paper reports to digital, mobile apps. So we built an ecosystem of partners. We have the best partners in the world. We decided not to self-develop our own proprietary coded solutions. So instead we went out and we partnered with companies like Tableau, with companies like Salesforce, with companies like Microsoft. And the great mega trend that we wrote is that all those component parts are sort of, they could be clicked together like Lego bricks. And then we decided we would piggyback off of Steve Jobs and deploy them as apps, right?
So it's a completely bespoke solution.
It's basically, Knowledge Cubed is like the iOS platform on your phone, and we have the largest suite of occupier analytic apps in the world. And some of those apps have become bestsellers and like top downloaded apps. One of them is Market Alpha. We won a bunch of awards for Market Alpha. Market Alpha is solving a pretty difficult problem in a pretty simple way. Markets are big, complicated, and they're hard to understand. So we're bringing together like all of the inventory information, all of the pricing information around commercial real estate, plus all of our brokerage information around like where the opportunities are, where the hidden spaces are. and we're bringing it to life in a super easy, usable app that is 3D, digital, and allows you to interact with everything.
So compare that to something else that's on the market right now from a residential perspective.
From a residential perspective, I mean, Zillow is an amazing app, right? It basically shows you everything you would want to know around what's available, what the pricing is, what the estimate of your, current home or former home may or may not be based on comps. I mean, think of that for commercial real estate.
It's amazing.
Right.
I mean, that's an amazing tool for both the end user and for brokerage.
Yeah, really powerful tool. Clients are very excited to interact with that tool.
All right. So you also work on some of the most complex transactions in the country. You get brought in, you've pitched a whole bunch of them in your career as well. Can you tell us about the universal high-level headaches that tenants are facing and how we're utilizing technology and information systems to alleviate these sticking points?
Yeah, so there's probably three big problems that I think clients face. One is, to your point, it's not a very transparent asset class. So what is kind of the right pricing for a given space or a given opportunity? That's definitely a big challenge that clients face. Our job is to really take them through a process that's transparent and ultimately try our best to make like an apples to apples comparison and negotiate the best possible concessions across those various different alternatives for a client. But that's a real challenge for a client, right? And all that information that's required to like get you to that apples to apples comparison is something that's now readily available in digital format. So I think that's a really interesting place to play for us.
Yep.
And then the other big challenge I see consistently is what's working and not working in terms of the current configuration of, a given location. So who's using what space when, how are they using it? Is it driving productivity, or is it really just sort of a part of the space that maybe we could do without, or we should be thinking about reconfiguring?
So that's kind of like the topic of workplace, and workplace has become a major focal point by most big companies nowadays. Are you saying?
Definitely. I mean, I think about it. Maybe zoom out for a second. You mentioned the focus on people, right?
Yep.
So when I started my career, it was we talked about cost per square foot, right? Then we talked about grossed up cost per square foot because we were factoring in the capital, right? The difference between what the landlord was going to contribute and what the tenant would have to pay in a given location to kind of normalize and make that apples to apples comparison. Then we evolved to cost per seat, right? Because different floor plate geometries could accommodate a different total seat count. So that was a way to normalize for geometry and efficiency across the various different locations. Increasingly in the last 10 years, that conversation has evolved to you could have a $6,000 a year seat and a $10,000 a year seat, but if your $6,000 a year seat has a $200,000 a year professional in it that's half as productive as the $150,000 a year professional and the $10,000 a year seat, you're missing a big part of that
Totally.
cost structure, right?
Right.
So workforce is definitely a key area of focus for people. People want to know where the depth of talent exists across the various different markets. Where can I find $150,000 talent for $85,000?
And getting the labor arbitrage.
Right.
What global markets should I be looking at? What are the universities that I can work with to help cultivate more depth of that function, right? I can actually work with a university to put some training into the university so that I get output consistently every year that I can fill those seats for. Because you don't want to be a company and go into a market, make a commitment for 2,000 seats, and then find out that you can only fill 1,000 seats, right? You lose your job over that.
And you lose your incentives too. If there's
incentives and you lose your job. Not a great outcome for our client.
Totally fired.
So we definitely want to get ahead of the curve on that. So workforce analytics, key part. And then we're to where we were talking about with kind of like how do we design the space so that we make sure that people are staying there, they're engaged, and they're excited about, working there and productive, because that's another big key piece to drawing that talent versus, your competitors that maybe are drawing that talent somewhere else.
Right. And they're healthy.
And they're healthy, and that the companies have learned from all the, again, like low cost of capital, all these new innovative ideas that have gone into the marketplace. Like, say what you want about WeWork, but they did teach us a lot about kind of how booking systems work, how that infrastructure can give you like space on demand, what sort of space as a service may look like as a business. So learning, how to take what you can in terms of that innovation and build it into your corporate structure is also something that they're looking at. What are the systems that we need to have in place? What does the data show us about like who's using what when?
Right.
And how we should, and whether or not we're getting a good return on that capital.
Right. So switching gears a little bit, you touched earlier on connectivity and how vital a proponent it is to us and what we do, both on the brokerage and management sides. So you recently launched the global CRM for our company, or you were a vital part of launching the global CRM for our company. Can you tell us why connectivity and information sharing are so important and are such a vital part of what we do day to day?
Yeah, absolutely. So CRM means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So we use Salesforce to track all of our historic client information. When I started in the business, if I wanted to understand what a relationship looked like, that, historical relationship that we had with a client, I probably would have had to have gone to 7 different systems.
Right.
And they were all pretty clunky.
Right.
So the idea that we could consolidate all of that information into an easy to use app that's available on your phone, wherever you travel, you're going to a meeting, you've got that information at your fingertips. Like that's an immediate value prop before we even start to talk about the crowdsourced power of like collaboration. And then you're to where none of that works unless people adopt it, right? So we gotta design it in a very easy, intuitive way so that it's like you immediately feel like you're getting value out of it, which we did a little bit differently than I think the competitors do. Competitors kind of traditionally, they were going out with like a billing system, to help finance with the reporting, which isn't really helping the brokers, right?
And they were also playing Big Brother, I think, oftentimes.
Yeah, totally. They
and
want to see your pipeline
and there were a lot of politics involved. And I think the nice thing about the initiative that you took is it's kind of a hands-off approach from a management side. It's really let the brokers figure it out. Let's put the pieces to the puzzle together and let's win business on a bigger scale.
Yeah,
it's for us.
And there's we could have a whole podcast on adoption, right? And like what how do you like create the breadcrumbs that bring people into it? We didn't go out to everybody. We sort of created a smaller group of early adopters, made them advocates. And then if people naturally, organically kind of wanted to be a part of something that felt exclusive, so they were raising their hand, how do I get involved? Like that created a little more energy around it, which was a good thing. But then ultimately the end game is for us, we're not the largest brokerage service platform, and we're not trying to be. But by not being the largest, at times, the optics in the marketplace may be that we don't have the same amount of information, and we are in an information business on some level. So there's actually a great opportunity for us if we can be more collaborative and more cohesive in sharing to create a sustainable competitive advantage around crowdsourced information, because it's much harder for the bigger competitors to be able to do that.
I hope none of our competitors are listening right now.
Even if
they're listening,
even if they're listening,
eliminate that.
It's very hard for them. It's very hard for them to do that.
Yeah.
Just think about what we do in our, in our sort of internal chatter feed, right? We're sharing almost like inside baseball information around what spaces are trading at, what spaces are available. You would not do that if you had the leasing agency teams in that same system.
But I also think it's a testament to our culture and the trust factor.
I completely agree.
Growing up at this company, the relationships that we all have with each other nationally, locally, even though we compete against each other.
Because we're the right size.
We're the right size.
We're just big enough to have like global coverage and still a sense of community and trust.
And I feel like community is one of the most important components for this company as we continue to grow. Community collaboration. I mean, we see it every day.
Yeah. So now sort of play that out, right? So now just put yourself in the client's shoes. Who wouldn't want to have access to that information? You've got the best tenant rep, like thought leaders in the world,
right?
Looking across the market, right? Like talking about the market. Like if your job is to execute the best possible transaction on behalf of your company, you don't want access to that information feed? It's the most valuable information feed that we could ever create. Like nobody else can do it, which is why I love collaboration and crowdsourced information as a competitive advantage for us. We're just the right size to do it. I don't care if the competitors listen, it's almost impossible for them to do it. I mean, it's almost impossible for CB to do it. It's almost impossible for JLL to do it. And it's almost impossible for Cushman or Newmark to do it. So just like we have that great advantage that we can take advantage, that we, and the technology just makes it that much easier.
It's the people and the technology combined.
Yeah.
So I think it's
Really
impossible
excited
for
about
them to replicate what we're doing because they don't have the same people.
So the CRM, so go back to the CRM. So we get the adoption at a different rate than we get at, these other firms. We get the collaboration at a different rate than we get at these other firms. All of that is now digitized as a data foundation, and we can bring it into tools like Market Alpha. So boom, like you immediately have impact as you distribute that app around the world. Who doesn't want to have access to that on the corporate side?
So let's talk about, some of these other technologies that you're seeing. You look at a lot of different technologies to build onto this platform. So what are some of the most exciting technologies you're seeing that we're not implementing? And how do you think those can potentially change the landscape of what we do?
I think one of the most exciting things that's happening is the ability for folks like yourself to create amazing content and distribute it globally. I mean, it's happening right now, right? So the cost of creating content has gone down so significantly that it's available to everybody. Now, the hard part is distributing and getting people to engage with the content,
Sure.
right? Because it is becoming hyper competitive, and the more stuff that's flooding at everybody, the less attention that everybody has, and it's harder to sort of gain a second of somebody's time or whatever, a minute of somebody's time.
Attention spans are so much shorter.
But I think it's just an incredibly powerful thing that's happening in terms of content distribution. I'll give you an example. So, I mean, this a good friend of mine from undergrad, in 2013 had an idea to start a razor subscription service. And by investing a reasonable amount of capital and being really engaging and having YouTube available, he went from 0 to $1 billion, monetization of a brand new business in 6 years. I mean, that's incredible that can happen.
I mean, that YouTube video went viral overnight.
Went viral.
He literally became an overnight
$multi-million views overnight. I mean, that's amazing if you really think about it.
Yeah.
So you obviously know that I had Gary Vaynerchuk speak to the group, and he said something very interesting speaking about, pushing content. He said, good information always finds its viewers.
Yep.
Always. So I think it all starts with pushing content. And to your point, I think when I started in the business 10 years ago, these platforms weren't as powerful as they are today. Everyone, no matter what stage of your career, has a voice.
Yep.
And that voice gets amplified. That's part of the reason why we're doing this today.
It's not just the voice, though. What's also really amazing is the production quality that happens on your iPad or your iPhone. I mean, think about it. Like 15 years ago, if you wanted to create high quality video content, think about the investment that you would have made, not just in the hardware and the software, but in learning it. Whereas now you can do it in a couple swipes. It's
you look at
incredible.
12-year-olds that are viral stars from their iPhones.
It's incredible. I think to me that's truly amazing. Like it's a massive revolution that's happening. Obviously, the streaming wars kind of a little bit of a different take on that, like much more capital intensive. But the fact that like Netflix became a content production and creation company versus just a distribution and licensing company is pretty interesting. And then to have the data to really understand what's working and not working and communicate with a much larger audience, I think is just incredibly powerful.
Well, Jamie knows that I'm a huge proponent of marketing. And I say, even though we're commercial brokers, without a client, we're not a commercial broker. And how do we get our clients? And it's becoming increasingly more difficult to get through to somebody on their phone via a cold call. And I always say, why go fishing with a hook when you could go fishing with a net? Might as well have all of your hooks in the water and see who bites. And I think by becoming a thought leader of some sort and pushing good content, it just makes that marketing component. Look, marketing and sales go hand in hand with one another. And historically, our business has not really had a major marketing component. And I think a lot of that goes back to us not having marketing budgets, everything being so expensive before if you wanted to create good video quality. And I feel like as that barrier to entry has lowered, nobody's really capitalizing in our industry other than maybe a handful of people on taking advantage of that free marketing that you can get on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Instagram, etc.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of the dinosaurs in our business, because I feel like the weighted average is probably 10 to 15 years older than us collectively in this room, if you averaged it out. They're not taking
I'm
advantage.
bringing you up on the average.
You're bringing us up, but
I'm bringing you down.
if you think about
Fair.
the major brokerage firms and their power brokers, they're not engaging with the end users like we can because we're more familiar with the technology. So I agree with you. I thought that was really interesting. I wasn't expecting that answer.
And the other, I mean, it raises everybody's game too, right? So you're smarter, I'm smarter because the access is just, it's everywhere. You know, you say, like, there was an app that I signed my dad up for called Masterclass, and it's like you can get all these classes by, you know, really well-established like thought
Martin
leaders
Scorsese,
across every
Instagram
industry.
value.
So now, you know, you've got like production quality cameras, right? That are, I mean, they're expensive, but not that expensive.
Sure.
You do, you know, 4K video, and, you know, you've got classes that could teach you immediately, and you've apps that, you know, can give you that production quality, and then you can distribute through social media. I mean, it's amazing.
It's amazing.
It's amazing.
And it didn't exist
it's
10
really
years
cool.
ago. And it's all happening so quickly.
Yeah, very
And now-
exciting.
And now there's TikTok. I don't even know what this TikTok schmick-schmock, whatever
I'm figuring
it is.
out TikTok.
So, Pat, clearly you've got not only a lot going on at your desk behind your computer, but a lot going on in your head. So what do you do to unwind, to reset, to chill?
Well, I think one of the big challenges, right, with so the upside, all the stuff we were talking about, the downside is you're just constantly bombarded by all sorts of things, and at times that can be overwhelming. You got to give yourself the space to actually have some, you know, creative, deep, functioning, you know, thoughts about where things are headed. I find, you know, I've major like outdoor passion, so like mountaineering has been a big passion of mine. I love getting out in the wilderness and like challenging myself in the physical environment. I find if I'm climbing a mountain, there's always inevitably like some point at which I'm like, I can't physically do this, and then I end up doing it, which reminds you that you're capable of a lot more than what you think you are capable of.
So metaphorical, but at the same time, it's so true.
And it happens every single time I do it. I
Yeah.
mean, like I climbed Grand Teton a couple years ago. I'm like, you know, starting out on the climb, like there's no way I can do this, you know, but then you do it.
Yep.
So I think that's a great space for me. I love to surf. We have a place in Montauk, so we get out there, and when I'm in the water, I'm not thinking about work. It's just kind of like a zen environment for me. Skiing is another one. Physical activity is a great way to you know, just get your endorphins going and kind of reduce the stress. And then, you know, interestingly, I've found I love devices. Like I'm definitely an early adopter. I have gone back to like traditional medium of like regular books, because one of the downsides for me is like I go like ADD. So it's like hard for me to finish something on a digital device. Whereas with a book, it's very satisfying to just have that like full read through and
Smell of the paper, the
I
feel
don't know,
of
man.
the
It's like
textures.
I'm like going a little bit old school on some of that stuff, but yeah, it's nice to have that too.
So overall, tell us what's really going on in terms of client technologies and what we should expect from you and the firm going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think really kind of what we said already, like the main opportunity is to showcase new ways of working and approaching problems for clients. And the problems haven't really changed, but the gap between what clients really want from us and what is possible is vanishing rapidly. So I think that creates a significant opportunity to gain share for companies like Savills. And as long as we can, you know, quickly, collaboratively, and thoughtfully move to where clients want us to engage with them, which is in the digital realm, I think the upside is massive for us. I mean, you're seeing, I always have the analogy like Uber, you know, Uber's not an app. Uber changed the way the world moves. They just used an app as a Trojan horse to drop themselves onto millions of iPhones, and they use pre-existing technologies like GPS technology, on-demand payment and service technology, and wrapped it in a beautiful, magical user experience. And boom, you know, whether or not you agree with the valuation, they completely revolutionize the way that people move. So those are some of the opportunities. I mean, Tesla again, despite what you think of the valuations, I mean, in 4 years, they overtook their two largest U.S. competitors in terms of market share or market cap. So Disney Plus, I think they launched 4 months ago. The valuation of Disney Plus is like a third to half of Disney at this point. So you're seeing even legacy competitors with long-term strategic advantages make courageous and bold decisions to do that. And I think Savills is the right size to do it. Like we said, we have a great global platform. We got the right people. We have a hyper focus on the customer. We can bring those technologies and the data to bear with the best thought leadership. I would want to buy us. I'm long on the stock.
I'm a shareholder. So am I.
So am I.
So Pat, thank you so much for joining us. This was probably one of the best conversations I've had about real estate. We will have you back. Thank you for the offer. Everybody be sure to tune in to the next episode of What's Really Going On.